Okay, so I'm going to do a rear axle job on this 4th generation Toyota 4Runner. It's an SR5, it's a 2008. I'm unsure of the gear ratio, but as far as I know, I've only seen differential and axle jobs for 3rd gen 4Runners. I haven't seen any videos, so this may be the first video that a just DIY mechanic has done. I'm assuming a little bit different than the 3rd gen. Okay, tires are off, and now we can see one thing that's easier than the 3rd gen is we don't have to undo the banjo bolt. We don't have to undo the caliper because it's not drum brakes. The ABS sensor needs to get unplugged, and I think I'll undo this first clip for the ABS sensor wire, and I'll move the ABS clip away, maybe tie it to the spring or something. Okay, so I have the caliper off. I was wrong about the slide bolts, of course. You don't undo the slide bolts, you undo the bolts that actually hold the caliper to the axle, to 17 millimeters right on the back there. Now we're looking at, I got the rotor off, and we're looking at the e-brake, parking brake. We've got the adjuster down there, and there's another spring in between the shoes, and then of course we have our hold down springs in there. Just the 2 top springs that go there, the 1 bottom spring that goes there, the adjustment arm which has the screw piece facing towards the rear, the top separator with the spring facing forward, and the nub, which you can't see, facing outward. And then the arm here, which is held on by the horseshoe clip and connects to the shoe. Also, by the way, these 2 spring holds right here, the spring holds do not twist. I was trying to twist them because I've seen other drum brakes, that's how they disconnect. These don't twist. They just have that pin that went into this hole, and you just pry the pin out, and that makes the whole thing pop out. So to get it on, you have to put the rod into that little slot and then pull this spring, compress this spring, and push that pin into the hole on the top side. And there's 2, looks like 10 millimeter bolts that hold the parking brake cable on, which will need to come off. Okay, I undid the 4 17 millimeter nuts that sit right on the back here on those studs. This is just gonna slide right out. It's just gonna slide right out. So I don't have a cameraman, so I'm not gonna be able to show sliding this out, but I'm just gonna grab it, pull it. Oh, you know what? I lied. It's not gonna slide out because the brake line here is connected to, shoot, I'm gonna have to undo the brake line. And what are the odds of that coming loose? Pretty slim. This piece is riveted to the dust shield. If it was bolted, I would just unbolt this and then I would just leave it. But it's not bolted, it's riveted to the dust shield, which is much sturdier than the front dust shield. So you're gonna have to take this brake line off. Okay, so I couldn't get the 10 millimeter flare nut to come off, which is pretty typical. And typically, every time I've worked on a car and I can't get a flare nut off, there's a workaround. It may not be by the book, but I found a workaround. So this bracket is held on with 2 spot welds, and I drilled the 2 spot welds out with a cobalt drill. When I reinstall the dust shield, I'm gonna have to hold it together with bolts. There's nothing holding the axle on now, and it's leaking oil. I was not prepared for how much oil was gonna come out, despite the differential being drained. A lot of oil came out. And this should just pull right off now. Okay, the axle is out. It does indeed just pull right out. Nothing in there. It just slides back in, just like putting a CV axle in. You know, you just line up the splines and wiggle it a little to make sure it's engaged, and it'll push right in. So it's real easy. Also, It's pretty heavy, but when it falls, because it will fall when you start to remove it, it's going to rest on these metal star-shaped things. It didn't really rest on the seal. You don't really have to worry about it damaging the seal. When you pull it out, it's very unlikely it's going to hit the seal. There's the main seal. I should replace that probably. So we got the ABS sensor right there. So this is the differences from the 3rd gen. There's no ABS wheel. The ABS wheel is part of the bearing. I know in the 3rd gens, the videos I've watched, there's like multiple seal races, and then there's an ABS ring, and then there's the bearing. This is way easier. You still need the special tool to take this apart, but there's basically 3 components. There's the bearing. The bearing comes as one unit. Typically when I see them sold, like on Rock Auto, they include this 4 star-shaped hub assembly, so the bearing is in there, and then the bearing has the ABS ring as part of it. Of course, you'll need to remove the ABS sensor to push that out. And then you have this seal race, which the seal race should be replaced at the same time it's pressed on, and then there's a snap ring right above it. So it's just bearing, seal race, snap ring. That's it. So on this side, I didn't even bother trying the flare nut wrench. I just drilled the spot welds out. This time I did a much neater job, made the hole a little bit bigger, a little bit more centered, and a couple taps with a punch and a hammer, and the whole bracket just comes right off. So this side, I opened it up. I didn't remove the parking brake. There was no parking brake, which honestly doesn't surprise me. It's not the first car I've bought where they've done a parking brake delete. And I think basically what happens is the parking brake, some system fails, and some home mechanic opens it up and decides, you know, I never use the parking brake anyway, I'm just going to get rid of it. And they just removed all the components. I wish I could clean that tube somehow, because there's a lot of sludge metal filings in there because the previous owner never did oil changes on their differential. So there's just a lot of dirt in there. This bearing feels much worse. The other bearing didn't feel so bad, but this bearing is shot. I mean, there's no play, but I can feel crunchiness in the motion. I'm going to approach it from the side here. As you can see, the drive shaft's already off, and it looks like the sway bars are going to kind of get in the way of some of them. I'm definitely have to go in there with a wrench, probably hit that with PB Blaster. The impact driver takes them off fine, but well, it didn't just take off the nut, it took the whole frickin' stud out. Not real happy about that, but it's not a big deal. I just put the stud back in when I'm done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 9 out, and the 10th one, maybe I can get it started by hand, but I don't want to take it all the way out. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the jack under here, and if I had a transmission jack, that would be best, but I don't, so I'm just going to use a regular jack, bring it up, strap the differential to the jack, remove the last bolt, beat on the differential with a hammer, hopefully it breaks loose, and then lower it with the jack. That's the game plan. Okay, so I was having troubles getting the differential past the sway bar, so I undid the sway bar mount here. I didn't undo the link. I'd rather not undo the link. And I undid the same 2 12mm bolts. Impact driver took them right out. Sway bar link. Now the sway bar is sitting on top of the differential, but it's further back because it was like right above the differential, and when you pull the differential out, it would stop the differential from moving out further. So because it falling down moves it farther forward, I think the differential will come out now. So I got it out just with removing the sway bar mounts, but it was a struggle, and I think before putting the new one in, I might just remove the sway bar links completely. So here it is, and it looks like it's been painted black. It's not. It should be bare metal. The teeth look great, which is good. This differential could be rebuilt. The black must be from the bearings, because the teeth don't really look worn down. Those look like chips. See those chips in the pinion? So I may be wrong. They're tiny little chips. They're not much. So I just put some plastic bags over the axles because they're going to be open for a while, and then I wrapped a garbage bag around the empty space where the differential is and taped it up. So, because these are going to be disassembled for probably at least a week at this point. So the conclusion of diff removal video, I counted the ring gear, I counted the pinion. First I sprayed this all down with brake cleaner actually, then I blew it out with compressed air, and then I sprayed everything down with WD-40 just so it wouldn't rust. But it's basically unlubed now, except for WD-40. The ring had 41 teeth, the pinion had 11 teeth, I counted both of them twice. I used marks that I already found on the teeth, like this one had a blue paint marker on it from the factory. So the ratio is 41 divided by 11. It's 3.727, which is often called 3.73. If I was going to make a shopping list for this job, this is what you would want. So you need the differential, in my case 3.73, no ABS. I want to add a solid spacer. It has a crush, what do they call it? A crush sleeve, but it's better to, it's a slight upgrade to go to a solid spacer instead. It's going to make the diff last longer, theoretically. So they're going to rebuild that. You need the diff gasket, which I still have to clean the old one off. At the same time, you should probably do the breather on top of the differential. I already did that, actually. You're going to need 2 axle seals, and then you're going to probably want to rebuild the axle, so you need bearings, sealed races, and snap rings for that. There's only 1 bearing, 1 seal race, and 1 snap ring per side. Unlike the 3rd gen, which has 2 seal races and an extra ABS ring, you don't have that. Mine were pretty rusty, so I'm thinking I might look up the part number and see if I can get the differential bolt, studs, nuts, washers going with clean stuff. And then, if needed, rotor pads hardware, and then parking brake pads and hardware, and parking brake cables if needed. And then at the same time, if you're doing this job, you should look at your drive shaft and see if you need to do the U-joints. So just doing the differential can become quite a big job because there's a lot of components that I'll be going through. Alright, that's it. I just need to place the order, ship this off, and then it'll be part 2 for the install.